I know, press fit bottom brackets. Some of you out there are huge fans of them and others maybe not quite such lovers. Now I've actually never had any problems with them on any of my own bikes, but I am aware that some people out there have. But let's take a look today then at how to fit them correctly using the correct tools, importantly, because I do understand that some of you out there do in fact hack or bodge your way to fitting them. So what exactly is a press fit bottom bracket then? Well, essentially, it's some bearings that are housed within an aluminium or a plastic cup, which are then pushed inside of the bottom bracket shell into place. Now, on the flip side of this is the traditional style bottom bracket, which is threaded, as you can see here. And instead of obviously being pushed into place, it uses a spanner which interconnects with the notches and then threads inside of the bottom bracket shell. Or in fact, another option is just a simple bearing which is pushed into the frame by hand, and then you have a little clip which holds it inside of the frame. Now there are some exceptions to the rule. Take for example this one here from Wheels Manufacturing, which is a push fit bottom bracket, but it threads together. Why, you may ask? Well, it's actually to stop any creaking of cups inside of a frame, which some frames do sadly have a slight problem with. So if you've got notches on the side of a press fit bottom bracket, or any bottom bracket for that matter, it means you're going to need to use a spanner to remove it rather than smashing it out, which is quite a crude term for what we're going to do very shortly. So what are we going to use then to actually remove those bearings that I quite crudely just said smashed out of a frame? Well, firstly, you are either going to use one of these or one of these, but more information on these two products shortly. What about fitting the new bearings then? Well, a bearing press is definitely recommended. I cannot recommend it highly enough. They do come in a huge variety of options and also budgets too, so there's no real excuse out there if you are a particularly competent home mechanic to get yourself one of these. So what are we going to do then? Well, let's get into the nitty gritty of it. First up, you're going to want to remove the chain set and keep a close eye out too for any spacers or washers in between the cranks and the bottom bracket itself, because if there are any in there at all, make sure you lay them out in the correct order so that when it comes to refitting, you're doing it correctly. Now, something to consider when removing these cups from a frame is that the manufacturer of these cups in most cases assumes that they are no longer any good. So they are going to get marked internally with the tool when you remove it. And if you are bodging your way out of it using a hammer and a screwdriver to smash that bottom bracket cup out, well, you're going to get problems like this. That's another reason why not to bodge it. Let's look then at how we remove a press fit bottom bracket from a standard sized axle diameter frame. When I say standard sized, in this case it's smaller than 30 millimeters, but as many of you know out there, the standards of bike components are changing almost daily, and who knows, maybe a 30 millimeter will be the standard by the time this video comes out. So how are we going to do it? Well, we're going to use one of these tools. So this tool from Park is actually designed to remove those press fit cups. How does it work then? Well, at this end we've got some sprung loaded endings, and then at this end we've got a nice flat one. So we're going to push first of all through the bottom bracket hole the blunt end. So in effect it's going to go through like this, and then these compressed sprung ends, if you like to call it that, are going to slowly compress, and then as you push it through they actually go out into position, and then we can do the magic. Now, using the bottom bracket bearing removal tool, you're going to want to thread it through the axle hole, and then you're going to find a point where you hear a satisfying click. That's the one. Now, with a hammer, you're going to want to give that tool a few sharp blows to remove these cups from the bottom bracket shell itself. So make sure that either you're prepared to catch it, or if not, where it's going to land is not on something valuable or fragile. Because yeah, I know someone who it happened to and they got in a lot of trouble at home, believe me. So with a few sharp blows, you're going to start seeing the actual bottom bracket here just moving out of the shell. Then you're in a good state of affairs. Just keep hammering away. Now, if you've got a sleeve inside of the bottom bracket shell, it's worthwhile just picking that out and removing it. That way you can give it a good clean up, as well as it makes the next part of the job just a little bit easier to get in behind the bearings. So before we go ahead and actually fit in the replacement bottom bracket, what we're going to do is just clean that up a little bit. So spray some degreaser in there, get yourself some cloths and wipe away any grease, dirt, grime, stones, anything like that which could in fact have got in there. That way putting in the new bottom bracket is going to be a lot easier, and also it's going to go in a lot straighter. What about then if you've got a PF30 or PressFit 30 style bottom bracket? It's loosely the same principle as what we've just done, but you use a different tool. So something like this one here from Park, and it would thread through the bearing like so, and then you imagine this is the other side. It just sits up against the inside housing there, and then, technical term coming up, a few sharp whacks with your hammer and bang, it's out of that bottom bracket shell. As easy as that. Now, like I said earlier on, you could risk bodging this, but it's really not worth it. How would you bodge it? Well, you'd use a hammer and a punch or a screwdriver, and essentially you would hit those cups out one side at a time. And because you're not hitting them out evenly, you risk distorting the actual shell of the bottom bracket, which in the process could actually destroy your frame. Doesn't sound quite so appealing now, does it, I guess? If you could ruin that frame. No, use the correct tools. Now, when it comes to fitting or refitting that PressFit bottom bracket into the shell, this is where a little bit of extra time could make the world of difference for you. So if you're the person out there who claims to have had a creaky PressFit bottom bracket, then think about applying some adhesive primer and then some retaining compound, allowing them both to dry, of course, before fitting the bottom bracket, therefore taking up some of the tolerance in differences between the two components. And then if you're fitting a PressFit bottom bracket into an aluminium lined shell, then think about using some grease. It's going to make it going in a little bit easier, as well as reducing the possibility of any creaks out there. Then finally, if you've got yourself a carbon lined shell, then the general consensus is actually to not use grease at all, because many people think it's going to swell the carbon, when in fact that carbon shell is actually covered in epoxy, so it shouldn't be having the opportunity to even swell that carbon. So I'm a little bit on the fence with that one. Personally, I don't bother applying any grease to it. And then if you've got titanium, then yeah, you could use some anti-seize, or you could use in fact some grease. Now, to install a BB86 or PressFit 30 bottom bracket is exactly the same process, and every mechanic I know out there actually does it the same way. So they install both cups into the frame at the same time. Ultra important here is to use the correct size drifts to actually press those bottom bracket cups into the shell. Why to use those? Well, you're going to get them evenly going in, so potentially if you don't use that, you could well destroy the bottom bracket, and then even worse, destroy your frame. And nobody wants to do that, do they? Nobody. You want to now actually start pressing the bottom bracket cups into the shell. So you should be able to get them just gently started by hand, and make sure they're not going in lopsided at all. And then with your bearing press and the drifts, begin to tighten that bearing press so that the cups are actually going into the shell. If there is any signs of them not going in straight or lopsided whatsoever, then remove them and restart the process, because continuing to do so could make the inside of your bottom bracket shell slightly elliptical, and well, that's going to give you that dreaded creak. Now, once you are satisfied that they're going in nice and straight, continue just gently turning that bearing press until the bearing cups are flush up against the bottom bracket shell. Once that is done, don't go any further, because you could risk damaging the bearings of the bottom bracket, and if you're really muscly, unlike me, then you could even in fact destroy the shell. I do know someone who continued to do it and they wrote off a frame. So there we are, you've managed to do it. Now it's just a case of refitting that chain set. And remember, of course, if you did have any washers or spacers, make sure you put them on in the correct place. It will make things much easier for you when you go out riding, believe me. Now do remember as well to like and share this video with your friends too, and make sure you give it a big old thumbs up. And if you've not already subscribed to the Global Cycling Network Tech channel, make sure you do, and also click that little notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Also, remember to check out the GCN shop at shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com. And now for a video on how to give your drivetrain a very deep clean, click just down here.